So far, we have the following API endpoint with the path /API/students. And this endpoint returns a list of students. And right here, you can see that this is hard coded. So no matter what, we always get 2 students, right? The same name, surname, email, and gender. So if I refresh this page, you can see that the only thing that changes is the actual student ID. And that's because right here, we simply return this list that contains 2 students, right? So you can see that this UID, it's randomly generated every time that we invoke this endpoint. So if I try that again, you can see that now the UIDs are different. So let's go ahead and actually change this implementation to talk to a real database. So let's go ahead and create a class that we can send this request to and then act as a service, i.e. the service that does all the business logic. So endpoints, so these endpoints, they should really just direct traffic to services. Services, they perform the business logic for your application, and then you have the DAO layer or data access that are responsible for connecting to databases, i.e. saving information, retrieving, deleting, and all other database operations. So let's go ahead first and create a new class right here. So go ahead and create a class and call it as student and then service. So this class right here is mainly for business logic. So let's go ahead and have a method right here. So go ahead and say public and then list, and then this will return a list of student. And let's go ahead and name this as get and then all and then students. No arguments. And then inside, let's go ahead and actually grab what we have inside of our controller. So this return statement right here. Cut that and then go back to student service and then paste that in. Okay, and there we go. Now let's go ahead and actually open up student controller. So now we have an error. So what we're going to do now is actually inject this student service and then invoke this method right here called get all students. So for that, let's go ahead and at the very top, go ahead and say private final and then student and then service, and let's call it student service. Let's go ahead and add this to the constructor. So I've just pressed option and then enter, add to constructor, and there we go. So if I collapse that, you can see everything we're doing. Now let's go ahead and use some dependency injection, right? So right here, you can see that I'm simply saying this field right here will be assigned to the one coming from this constructor. So for that, let's go ahead and use dependency injection. So let's go ahead and say at and then auto wire. And Spring Boot will actually go ahead and grab this dependency and then inject it here. And then we can have access to it. So right here in this field right here. And then inject it here and then assign it to our private field. So now what we can do is simply say return and then student service dot get all students. Now, if I actually restart the server, so let's see that if this will work. So you can see that we have an error. So it says parameter 0 of constructor and then student controller required a being of type student service. So that means that we haven't told Spring Boot to instantiate this student service. So I'm going to open up the project tab and then go to student service. And in this class right here, we haven't told Spring Boot that this class student service needs to be instantiated so that we can inject it in other classes. Now, the way to do it is by simply saying at and then component. So this annotation is fine, but with Spring, we can be a bit more specific and tell that this class right here is actually a service. So anyone looking at this class, they will know that this class is a service. The same with configuration, right? So if I open up data source, you can see that we have configuration right here, but we could simply say add and then component. This would be the same thing, but we can be more specific. Now, if I go back to the student service and if I start the actual application, this now should work. So if I play, just give it a second, and there we go. So you can see that the app is up and running. And if I open up Chrome and then refresh, you can see that we have the exact same list. Now that we have the service layer, which is responsible for business logic, next, let's go ahead and create a class that will be responsible for interacting with our database.